The sun rose slowly over the purple plains of Zithera, casting long, golden shadows across the jagged rock formations. In the distance, a small village rested at the edge of a silver-blue river, its waters shimmering in the morning light. The village was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the air itself feared the day ahead. Among the modest homes, one stood out, not for its size, but for its unusual clutter of devices, gears, and strange metallic shapes that glinted in the sun. This was the home of Lyria, a young widow, and a widow was not someone anyone in the village looked upon kindly. Lyria stood at the edge of her workshop, her large violet eyes staring at the horizon. Her hair was tied neatly in a braid, but a few stubborn strands fell across her face, catching the sunlight. Her small hands were calloused from work, but they moved with precision and care over the tools she carried. In Zithera, a widow's place was supposed to be hidden, quiet, and obedient, but Lyria had never been obedient, not in the ways that mattered. She had lost her mate a year ago, a victim of a hunting accident far from the village, and the gossip that followed had turned the villagers against her. "They say she will never find joy again," one neighbor whispered to another as they passed by her home. "Her eyes are empty, she has no strength left." She had learned long ago that cruelty often wore the mask of opinion, and that the world only took notice when one dared to rise above it. She carried grief quietly, but she did not let it define her. In her workshop, surrounded by her inventions, she felt powerful in a way the villagers could not understand. Today, she was working on something new. It was a small device, almost no larger than a fist, shaped like a thin cylinder with intricate patterns etched into its surface. She held it carefully, adjusting the inner gears with a delicate touch. This device, she thought, could change the way energy was stored on Zithera. If it worked, it could power entire homes with less effort, reduce the strain on their limited resources, and perhaps even protect the fragile ecosystem of the plains. Her concentration was broken by a familiar sound, the soft, mocking laughter of children outside her workshop. They had been following her for weeks, jeering at the widow who dares to think. Lyria sighed but did not turn. "Do they never tire of their foolish games?" she muttered to herself. She didn't need to watch, she knew the sounds all too well. The children were cruel, but their cruelty was learned. It came from adults who whispered that widows were unlucky, that their work and ideas were nothing, that they should hide and accept their fate. Yet Lyria had never been one to accept fate quietly. Her hands moved quickly, adjusting the last gear in the cylinder. A soft hum began to resonate from the device, and she smiled faintly. It worked. Just a small prototype, but it worked. The cylinder glowed faintly, storing the energy she had drawn from the sun and the river's subtle currents. This was just the beginning. Outside, the laughter of the children grew louder, and one of them shouted, "She's crazy. She'll blow herself up with her silly machines." One day, the world would see her value, not as a widow, not as a target for gossip, but as someone who could change Zithera. As the morning passed, a stranger arrived at the village. Lyria noticed him immediately. He was unlike any Zitheran she had ever seen. His skin was pale, his hair a dark shade she had never encountered, and his eyes held a quiet curiosity. He moved with a confidence that did not demand respect, but rather invited it. The villagers were uneasy. Foreigners were rare, and humans were rarer still. They were known for their daring, their strange ways, and their ability to do what Zitherans would never attempt. The stranger approached the central square, greeted politely, and spoke in a voice that carried easily over the whispers of the villagers. "I am Ethan," he said. "I come in peace to learn and to share." She had heard tales of humans from the old traders who passed through Zithera, stories of their courage, ingenuity, and kindness. To see one here in her own village felt almost like a sign. For hours, Lyria worked in her workshop, peeking occasionally through the small window to watch Ethan interact with the villagers. Unlike the others, he did not sneer or look down upon anyone. He asked questions politely, helped the young with their chores, and listened attentively to the elderly who shared knowledge of Zithera's history. When the afternoon sun reached its peak, Lyria could no longer resist. She stepped out of her workshop, her tools set aside, and walked toward the square. The villagers noticed immediately and whispered among themselves. "What is she doing? She dares to leave her home? She is even braver than before." "Your devices are remarkable, even from what the villagers have shared. It stores energy more efficiently than anything we currently use. It could power entire homes with less strain on our resources." He was thinking beyond the village, beyond their small planet. Most Zitherans never looked past their immediate surroundings, but humans were different. They imagined, they dreamed, they dared. Before Lyria could respond, the mocking voices returned. This time not children, but the adults who had long scorned her. "Look at her," one shouted. "She flaunts her useless toys like she matters," another added. "A human sees her as special, ridiculous, she is nothing. They can help everyone here, if people are willing to see beyond their fear and prejudice." Lyria realized that this stranger, this human, had done something her inventions could not. He had offered her validation in a world that constantly denied it. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the village. Lyria returned to her workshop, carrying the small cylinder carefully. She placed it on her workbench and sat down, her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps humans were more than just curious visitors. Perhaps they represented a chance for change, for recognition, for something beyond the narrow expectations of Zitharan society. As night fell, Lyria looked out at the stars, wondering what lay beyond Zithara. Somewhere out there, humans lived lives full of courage and discovery, unbound by the rules that trapped her people. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, not just for herself, but for what she could accomplish if she dared to step beyond the limits set by others. And she would. She did not yet know how or when or who would help her along the way. But one thing was certain, she was no longer invisible. She had a voice, a mind, and the beginnings of something powerful. And if anyone on Zithara thought a widow could be weak, they would soon learn just how strong she could be. The stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to the start of something new. Somewhere in the universe, a human named Ethan had noticed her, and she had noticed him. Their meeting was small, quiet, and easily overlooked. But for Lyria, it marked the beginning of a journey that would change her life, and perhaps even the world, forever. And as she lay down to rest that night, the hum of her device still glowing softly on her workbench, Lyria allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ridicule, and new opportunities. But she was ready. She had survived loss, scorn, and isolation. She had survived being mocked, and now she had the first glimmer of a future where she could rise above it all. The next morning, Zithara's sky was painted with shades of orange and pink as the sun rose over the jagged plains. Lyria was already awake, moving quietly through her workshop. She could hear the soft hum of the cylinder she had perfected the day before, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. She studied it with care, adjusting the tiniest gears, testing each function again and again. For her, this was not just an invention. It was proof that even someone cast aside by society could create something remarkable. Outside, the village was slowly coming to life. Merchants arranged their stalls, children ran about, and the older Zitharans moved in their deliberate, quiet ways. But today, there was an unusual energy in the air. The arrival of the human, Ethan, had stirred curiosity, suspicion, and for some, admiration. Rumors spread quickly through the village. Some whispered about his manners, his confidence, and the way he treated everyone with respect. Others scoffed, dismissing him as an outsider who would soon leave. Lyria ignored the whispers. She had spent too long worrying about what others thought. She focused on her work, but she could not deny the curiosity that tugged at her. Who was this human, really? What did he want from Zithara? Most importantly, why did he treat her with such respect when everyone else mocked her? By mid-morning, the human was wandering through the village again. Lyria decided to step outside and observe him from a distance. She watched as he knelt to help a young child untangle a rope, smiled at an elderly merchant struggling with her basket, and listened carefully as a teacher explained the village's energy system. Every gesture he made showed patience, thoughtfulness, and kindness, qualities rare among Zitharans who valued status and tradition above all else. Finally, Lyria approached him. She had rehearsed her words carefully in her mind, but as she drew closer, they felt inadequate. Still, she spoke clearly and politely. "Good morning, I am Lyria. I hope you find your stay here comfortable. Most think you are strange." She felt a spark of hope, a feeling she had not experienced in a long time. "I have something I would like to show you," she said, leading him toward her workshop. "It is not much, but it could help your people and maybe mine as well." "She dares to invite him into her home," one muttered. "This human may not respect us. He may take her ideas and leave." Ethan listened attentively, leaning closer to inspect the delicate mechanics. "This is remarkable," he said. "You have a deep understanding of energy and mechanics. With this device, you could improve life across the planet. You've thought far beyond your own needs." She had spent countless hours alone, working, refining, dreaming of a world that would see her abilities rather than her status. To hear someone recognize that effort without judgment was both comforting and exhilarating. Just as they were discussing the device, a loud shout echoed from the village square. The adults who had mocked her the day before had gathered a small crowd. "Look at her," one shouted. "She flaunts her work to a human. She is nothing but a foolish widow thinking she is clever. My work is real, it is useful, and it matters." Lyria realized that in this small moment, she had begun to challenge their assumptions. She had begun to show them that strength and intelligence were not limited by social status or tradition. Over the next several days, Lyria and Ethan spent more time together. She showed him her other inventions, each more ambitious than the last. A small water purifier that could filter river water for the entire village, a mechanical harvester that reduced the need for manual labor, and a device that could store excess energy during the day for use at night. Each creation demonstrated her brilliance and her commitment to helping others, even when those same others scorned her. Ethan, in turn, shared stories of humans and their inventions, of courage, exploration, and problem-solving. He spoke of planets where humans had faced harsh environments, where they had overcome danger through ingenuity and teamwork. Lyria listened with fascination, absorbing every word. She saw parallels between the human way and her own approach, a belief in action, creativity, and the possibility of change. One afternoon, as they worked on refining the cylinder, Lyria paused and looked at Ethan. "Why do you treat me as an equal?" she asked. "Most people in my village only see a widow." "They do not see me." For the first time, she did not feel small, invisible, or weak. She felt capable, strong, and seen. And perhaps for the first time, she imagined a future that was not constrained by the cruel expectations of her society. Word of their collaboration began to spread. Some villagers were intrigued, secretly admiring her inventions and the human who treated her with respect. Others were outraged. "This will ruin our traditions," an elder warned. "She is challenging everything we have known. If humans think so highly of her, what does that say about us?" One evening, as the twin moons rose over Zithera, Ethan and Lyria sat outside her workshop, the glowing cylinder between them. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the river and the plains. Lyria spoke softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "I do not know what the future holds, Ethan, but I know that I want to change it. I want to show my people that strength, creativity, and courage matter more than fear and prejudice." For Lyria, it was the first time in a long while that she felt truly understood, and in that understanding she found hope. As the village slept under the twin moons, a soft hum filled the air from her workshop. Lyria's cylinder pulsed gently, a small beacon of innovation and possibility. Outside, the night was calm, but the world was beginning to shift. Slowly, quietly, change was stirring, carried by the courage of a widow who refused to be defined by loss, and a human who believed in the strength of those who dared to rise above prejudice. The next morning promised new challenges, new ridicule, and new opportunities, but Lyria was ready. She had discovered something powerful. Respect and trust were not given. They were earned through courage, intelligence, and kindness. And she intended to show the village, and perhaps the entire planet, that even a widow cast aside could inspire change beyond anyone's expectations. The stars faded as the sun rose again over Zithera, painting the plains with golden light. Lyria adjusted the cylinder one last time before heading outside, determined to face whatever came next. She had found an ally, a mentor, and a friend in Ethan. And together, they would begin to show the people of Zithera that the world was far bigger, more curious, and more full of potential than anyone had ever imagined. The morning sun stretched over Zithera like a warm blanket, scattering golden light across the plains. Lyria stood outside her workshop, the soft hum of her devices mixing with the gentle wind. She had spent the night considering something she had never dared before, the possibility of asking Ethan, the human who had seen her value, for something far bolder than companionship. For weeks, she had watched him interact with the villagers, learned from his ideas, and shared her inventions. He treated her with respect and curiosity, not pity or mockery. And as much as she admired his mind, she realized that she also admired his courage, his willingness to step outside expectations, and his belief in the potential of everyone he met. For the first time, Lyria imagined a life where she was more than just a widow defined by loss, where she could be a partner, a colleague, and a friend to someone who truly saw her. Yet the thought of asking him to marry her felt impossible. Zitheran society frowned upon human-alien relationships. Interspecies unions were considered scandalous, even dangerous. The village elders would see it as a challenge to their authority. The adults would mock her endlessly, and the children would laugh. But as she watched Ethan approach her workshop that morning, smiling politely at the villagers who gawked at him, she felt a quiet determination settle within her. She had faced ridicule before. She had faced loneliness. She had survived the scorn of her own people, and now she would face this challenge too. Ethan noticed her waiting and approached, his stride calm but confident. "Good morning, Lyria. I hope the day finds you well." Words that had seemed so clear in her mind suddenly felt inadequate. She took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something bold," she began, "something that may seem strange to you or even impossible." For a moment, Ethan's eyes widened slightly in surprise. He opened his mouth, then closed it, searching for the right response. Lyria feared she had misjudged him, that he would laugh or reject her outright. Instead, he smiled gently. "That is indeed bold," he said. "I did not expect it, but I am not offended. Tell me why you ask." She had expected confusion or dismissal, but not understanding. She tried to explain, her voice steady even as her heart raced. "Because you see me as I am. You see my work, my mind, my courage. You do not judge me for being a widow, for being small, or for being different. Most people here cannot see beyond what they expect. But you see possibility, not limitation." And she paused, searching for words. "I want to share my life with someone who believes in me as I believe in my own abilities. I want partnership, respect, and understanding. I want someone who sees me, not the rules others impose. Your society will not understand. Many may ridicule you both. But your honesty and bravery are remarkable, Lyria. I admire them deeply." Ethan shook his head. "I would like to understand your world better first, to learn how we might navigate it together. But know this, I respect you, and I would not abandon someone because their society fears what is new or different. I am willing to consider this." Together, they spent the day discussing possibilities, how her inventions could benefit the village, how they could navigate the rigid customs, and how they could build trust with those who doubted them. Yet not everyone in the village was impressed. Word of her proposal, even tentative, spread quickly. The adults who had mocked her before now whispered in anxious tones. "She thinks she can marry a human?" one asked. "This is dangerous. It will bring shame to the village." Some admired her courage, some merely gossiped, but all were watching. Lyria knew the path ahead would not be easy. Asking Ethan to marry her was only the beginning. Convincing the village, the elders, and even herself that such a union could work would take more courage than she had ever shown before. But she felt stronger now. She had someone by her side who saw her worth, and that made all the difference. That evening they returned to her workshop, where her devices hummed softly in the dim light. Lyria showed Ethan her newest invention, a small energy collector that could draw power from the wind and store it efficiently. "This could help the village, even if they refused to understand it at first," she said. "Sometimes progress must come before acceptance. Your inventions, your courage, and your vision, they are stronger than fear or prejudice." Over the next few days, Lyria worked tirelessly on her projects. Ethan assisted where he could, offering insights she had never considered. Together, they experimented with new ways to harness energy, to improve efficiency, and to make the village safer and more productive. Their collaboration drew attention, both positive and negative. Some villagers began to watch in secret, impressed by the clever devices and the unusual partnership. Others spread rumors, attempting to undermine her work and discredit her character. "She only seeks attention," they whispered. "She wants to flaunt her relationship with a human. She will bring trouble to us all." She had survived scorn before, and she would survive it again. Each device she completed, each problem she solved, became a small victory against prejudice. With Ethan's encouragement, she felt unstoppable. One afternoon, they were demonstrating a wind-powered collector near the village square. A sudden gust sent the device spinning perfectly, storing more energy than either had expected. The villagers gasped. Some whispered in astonishment. Others grumbled, unwilling to admit that Lyria's invention was impressive. Ethan turned to the crowd, speaking clearly and calmly. "What you see here is the work of someone with intelligence, dedication, and courage. Judging her because of her past or her status does not change her abilities. These devices can benefit everyone, if you are willing to see beyond fear and tradition." The air was cool, carrying the scent of the river and the distant plains. Lyria spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Do you think they will ever accept this? Accept me. In time, they may come to understand. And if not, that does not diminish your value or our potential together." The next morning, she awoke with renewed determination. She would face the village elders, the whispers, and the ridicule. She would show them that courage, intelligence, and kindness were stronger than fear, tradition, and prejudice. And she would continue to build, to invent, and to inspire. Because she knew something the villagers had not yet learned. A widow, cast aside by her society, could rise above the limitations imposed on her. She could challenge expectations. She could show that strength was measured by action and character, not by social rank or conformity. And with a human by her side who believed in her, Lyria realized she was no longer alone. Together, they would not only prove her worth, they would begin to change the world. The sun climbed higher over Zithra, shining on the plains, the village, and Lyria's workshop. It lit the glowing cylinder, the spinning wind collector, and the determined faces of a widow who refused to be invisible, and a human who believed in the strength of those who dared to rise above prejudice. The morning sun painted the sky in soft shades of gold and violet over Zithra. Lyria stood at the edge of the village square, her hands brushing over the smooth surface of her newest invention. The cylinder hummed softly, storing energy with remarkable efficiency, while the wind-powered collectors spun gently nearby. Today was different from other days. Today, she and Ethan would demonstrate the devices to the entire village at the festival, an annual gathering where Zitherans celebrated their culture, technology, and progress. The festival had always been a display of hierarchy. Only the respected and powerful were given space to present their creations, and widows were rarely allowed in such positions. Lyria felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She knew many villagers still saw her as a foolish widow, a woman unworthy of recognition. But she also knew that the time for fear had passed. She had prepared, worked tirelessly, and had a human ally by her side who believed in her abilities. Ethan stood beside her, adjusting one of the wind collectors. His calm presence steadied her nerves. "You are ready for this," he said softly. "Your work speaks for itself, the rest is just noise." Merchants, children, and adults crowded around, whispering about the widow who dared to take the stage. Some were curious, some were disapproving, and others were openly hostile. When Lyria stepped forward, the murmurs grew louder. She felt the weight of their eyes, but she did not falter. She placed the cylinder and other devices carefully in front of her and gestured for Ethan to begin. "Greetings, everyone," Ethan called out, his voice calm and clear. "We are here to show you inventions that can improve life on Zithra. These devices are the work of someone who has courage, intelligence, and vision, qualities that matter more than status or tradition." For the first time, someone had introduced her not as a widow or an outcast, but as a creator, as a thinker, as someone whose work could change the village. She began to explain each device, showing how the cylinder stored energy efficiently, how the wind collectors could provide power without exhausting natural resources, and how a water purifier she had designed could supply clean drinking water to every home. Her words were clear and simple, but the ideas were profound. Some villagers gasped. Others whispered, their surprise mingled with doubt. "She is clever, too clever," one muttered. "No widow could do this." Suddenly, a gust of wind picked up, and the collectors began to spin faster than anyone had expected. The cylinders glowed brightly, storing more energy than even Lyria had predicted. The villagers gasped again, this time in awe. Ethan turned to the crowd. "What you see here is the result of dedication, knowledge, and courage. Judging someone by their past or status does not change their abilities. Lyria's work proves that innovation can come from anyone willing to try, regardless of tradition or prejudice." Others continued to frown, reluctant to admit admiration. One of the elders stepped forward, a stern expression on his face. "These devices may be impressive," he said, "but they do not change the rules of our society. You, Lyria, are a widow. You are not in a position to show your work at this festival. You risk scandal and disrespecting our traditions." "I am not asking for permission," she said firmly. "I am showing you what is possible. I am showing that courage, intelligence, and dedication matter more than fear and prejudice. If our society is to grow, we must embrace new ideas, not mock those who create them." Lyria realized that she had begun to challenge not just the festival, but the entire mindset of her village. She had always known that change would be difficult, but she now understood that it was possible. The demonstration continued. Lyria showed how the energy collected by the devices could power homes, workshops, and public spaces. She demonstrated the water purifier, explaining how it could prevent illness and make life easier for everyone. She spoke about efficiency, sustainability, and innovation, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. As she spoke, some villagers began to nod in quiet approval. Children whispered excitedly to each other, inspired by her bravery and skill. Even a few adults who had been skeptical leaned forward, their curiosity overtaking their prejudice. Ethan stayed close by, assisting with the devices and explaining technical details in simple terms. His presence lent credibility to Lyria's work, showing the villagers that her inventions were not just clever, but reliable and useful. By the time the sun reached its peak, the festival square was filled with people who had seen Lyria's genius firsthand. Some still whispered criticism, but many were now genuinely impressed. The elders who had once sneered at her could no longer ignore the results. Lyria had proven herself not through words alone, but through action, through creation, and through courage. As the festival drew to a close, Lyria stood beside Ethan, watching the villagers interact with the devices. A young boy approached cautiously, his eyes wide. "Did you really make all this?" he asked. Lyria smiled. "Yes, and anyone can create something meaningful if they try. It does not matter who you are or what others think of you." That evening, Lyria and Ethan returned to her workshop. The devices hummed softly, a reminder of the day's success. Lyria leaned against the table, exhausted but exhilarated. "I did not expect such a response," she admitted. "Some of them still doubt me, but many are beginning to see. But you have taken the first step. You have shown them what is possible, and that is the most important thing." She had shown that strength, intelligence, and courage were more powerful than fear and prejudice. As the night fell over Zithra, Lyria stood outside her workshop, gazing at the stars. The twin moons reflected in the river, casting silver light over the plains. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but also an understanding that this was only the beginning. The village's transformation, the acceptance of her work, and the possibility of a future with Ethan would require more courage, more innovation, and more persistence. But for the first time, she felt ready. She had proven her worth not just through words, but through action. She had inspired curiosity and respect. And with Ethan by her side, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hum of the devices echoed softly in the night, a reminder of what had been achieved and what was yet to come. Lyria allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new critics, and new opportunities, but she would meet them head-on with courage, intelligence, and determination. For Lyria, the festival had not just been a demonstration of inventions. It had been a declaration. A widow could be strong, brilliant, and fearless. Prejudice and ridicule could not define her. And humans, through courage, respect, and partnership, could help open doors that had long been closed. As she settled into her workshop for the night, the village slowly quieted. The elders retreated, some thoughtful, some still disapproving. The younger Zitherans whispered excitedly about what they had seen. And Lyria, the widow who had once been mocked and ignored, stood at the center of a growing wave of respect and possibility. Tomorrow, she would continue her work. Tomorrow, she would face the next challenge. And tomorrow, she would continue to prove that courage, creativity, and partnership, whether with humans or through her own brilliance, could change the world, one invention, one idea, and one act of bravery at a time. The morning sun spilled golden light over the plains of Zithra, reflecting off the silver-blue river that wound gently through the village. Lyria stood at the edge of her workshop, her hands resting lightly on the devices that had brought her this far. Today was unlike any other day. Today, the village had agreed to a ceremony that would celebrate innovation, courage, and partnership. It was the first time a widow and a human would be honored together, a moment that many had once thought impossible. The villagers gathered slowly in the square. At first, there was a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and unease. Elders whispered quietly, unsure of whether this recognition was proper. Merchants and children crowded closer, eager to witness the event. And at the center, Lyria felt the familiar presence of Ethan, calm and encouraging, a reminder that she was not alone in this moment. For weeks, she had worked tirelessly with Ethan, refining her inventions, proving their usefulness, and demonstrating her intelligence and courage. Today was the culmination of all that effort, a public acknowledgement that she was more than her status, more than the whispers of ridicule, more than the narrow expectations of tradition. The ceremony began with Ethan stepping forward. His voice carried clearly over the crowd. "Today, we celebrate not only the creativity and innovation that Lyria has brought to this village, but also the courage it takes to challenge tradition, to rise above prejudice, and to believe in the value of one's own abilities. Lyria has shown that strength, intelligence, and vision are qualities that matter far more than birthright or circumstance. She looked at the villagers, meeting their eyes with quiet confidence. "I am grateful for this moment," she said, "not because of the recognition itself, but because it shows that courage and dedication can make a difference. I have faced doubt, mockery, and fear, yet I never stopped believing that I could contribute something meaningful to this village, to this planet. And I will continue to do so." Ethan stepped closer, taking her hand gently. "And I am honored to stand with Lyria, not as an outsider, but as a partner and a friend. Together, we have discovered what is possible when courage meets opportunity, when respect meets determination. Let this moment remind us all that collaboration, understanding, and empathy can bridge worlds and challenge outdated beliefs." Even those who had once scorned her could not ignore the results: clean water flowing from her purifiers, energy stored and used efficiently in homes, and a new sense of hope spreading through the village. Lyria smiled softly. She had not expected universal approval, nor did she need it. The fact that many were beginning to see the truth mattered more than any full acceptance. Courage had won a small victory today, and that was enough to inspire change. The ceremony continued with a demonstration of her latest devices. The cylinders glowed as they stored energy from the sun and wind. The water purifiers ran smoothly, and the villagers watched in awe as homes and public spaces lit up efficiently. Children laughed with delight, eager to learn and help with the devices. Adults who had once been skeptical whispered quietly to each other, asking questions and expressing interest. Even some elders nodded, impressed despite themselves. After the demonstration, Lyria and Ethan were invited to speak with the village council. The elders had gathered, their faces composed but their eyes revealing a new respect. "Your work is undeniable," one elder said slowly. "Your devices have improved the village in ways we did not imagine. And your courage, Lyria, is remarkable. You have shown us that innovation is not limited by social rank or tradition. But that requires openness, trust, and willingness to see beyond fear and convention. We must encourage one another, share knowledge, and recognize ability wherever it is found." As the council adjourned, the villagers approached Lyria to express admiration, curiosity, and support. Children asked questions about her inventions, eager to learn and help. Adults who had doubted her nodded respectfully, some offering assistance or suggestions. Lyria smiled, recognizing that respect was beginning to replace ridicule. The festival continued with celebration, laughter, and music. Lyria and Ethan walked together through the village square, observing the energy of a community beginning to embrace new ideas. The twin moons rose overhead, casting silver light across the plains, reflecting in the river, and bathing the village in a quiet, magical glow. At the end of the evening, Lyria and Ethan were invited to stand at the center of the square. A ceremonial table had been prepared, decorated with flowers and ribbons representing unity, courage, and progress. Lyria felt a flutter of nerves, but also a sense of calm. She had faced ridicule, scorn, and fear, and she had emerged stronger. Today was the recognition of her perseverance and vision. Ethan took her hand once more. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Lyria nodded. "I am." And through partnership with Ethan, a human who sees value in courage and creativity, we honor the potential of collaboration and understanding. The festival had never seen such a moment. A widow, once mocked, standing proud with a human who believed in her, celebrated for intelligence, courage, and determination. Lyria felt a warmth spread through her chest. She glanced at Ethan, who smiled back, pride and admiration shining in his eyes. Together, they had proven something extraordinary, that courage, intelligence, and partnership could challenge expectations and inspire change. As the night grew deeper, the festival winding down, Lyria and Ethan walked to the edge of the village, where the river shimmered under the twin moons. The air was calm and cool, carrying the scent of flowers and earth. Lyria breathed deeply, savoring the quiet triumph of the day. "You have changed more than just your life," Ethan said quietly. "You've begun to change the hearts of your people. You've shown them that courage, creativity, and kindness are stronger than fear and prejudice. But now I know that I am not alone, and with you by my side, I feel ready for anything. And perhaps, through partnership and courage, we can show Zithra that the world is bigger, richer, and more full of possibility than they have ever imagined." For Lyria, the journey that had begun with ridicule and doubt had reached a turning point. She had proven her worth through skill, intelligence, and bravery. She had inspired others. She had gained recognition, respect, and partnership. The night was filled with quiet magic, the hum of her devices echoing softly across the plains. Lyria allowed herself a moment to reflect, to imagine the future they could build together, a world where courage, innovation, and empathy were valued above fear and prejudice. She had survived loss, mockery, and societal expectation. She had risen above, and now, with Ethan by her side, she realized that the possibilities were endless. Tomorrow, she would continue her work. Tomorrow, she would continue to teach, innovate, and inspire. But tonight, she allowed herself to savor the triumph of a widow who had been mocked and ignored, now celebrated for intelligence, courage, and the power to change the world. The stars glittered above Zithera, silent witnesses to the remarkable journey of a woman who refused to be invisible, and a human who believed in the strength of those who dared to rise above fear and prejudice. Together, they looked toward the horizon, toward the future, toward a world full of promise, where courage, respect, and partnership could shine brighter than any obstacle. And in that moment, Lyria knew that she had not only proven her worth to Zithera, but had also begun to show the universe what humanity, its courage, kindness, and ingenuity, could achieve one brave step at a time.